Lizzie, and hi everybody. So if you could use the chat and just say where you're sitting and also what is your, are you a yoga therapist, how many hours you've been trained, 200, 500, what's your favorite population to teach? So we'll just start making sure you know how to use that chat function as well. So as you're starting to do that, I'm going to share my screen and let you see our slides, and you'll get a copy of this after our presentation, okay? So without further ado, and what I do when I present, I typically keep it in this kind of mode. So you can see the slides on the side, but the big slide is big enough for us all. Oops, there you go. And so I can still see you and I can still tell when chats are coming in. So that helps me be more up close and personal with you all. So this is my team, Amanda, Ainsley, and Aviva. I couldn't do it without them. And we're in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. And I already got an introduction of my background, but I wanted to say safety first. For your safety, support, and comfort, I want to make sure that you take care of yourself. There is some demoing in this presentation. You're welcome to do it with me. You'll get the recording too, so it might be fun to watch and then come back and look again. So part of this talk is about the uniqueness of every one of your students as a teacher. You are unique as well, of course. So honor your medical history, your range of motion, your strength, balance. I have a few props behind me that I've got a mat, I've got a blanket. I use these things called Gertie balls. They're in a picture on the screen, a block, just have a few things. Again, you can take this training more as watching and listening. You might be at your desk eating lunch, for example, and then play later. You know, this is just an introduction to a functional approach to teaching. It's really something that I have made my own and have integrated it with everything that has made me me over the last almost 65 years. So the same thing. So this is really just hopefully a catalyst to go, what should I learn more about to teach more functional? Some of you may already be teaching functionally, but some of you may not define it like I do. So I have had many, many, many teachers in functional approaches to mind, body, heart, not just to the physicality. So come into this course, I hope, with a beginner's mind. And I'm really not asking anyone to change their lineage or style, but how you could integrate some of these things that I'll be talking about. And to really walk into this practice, it took me courage and a lot of patience. So make this your own. I have my team that I showed on the slide, all were interns at Dogwood Studio, is my studio. And really to come and learn this type of approach. And now they're teaching me, and they're teaching, I just learn every day from them. So what we're going to focus on with our time today is what I define as the components of a functional approach to teaching yoga. A lot of the teachings are focusing on the physicality, which is super important, but there's other components for sure. And actually the physical space of it is just lifelong learning, lifelong learning. And what really my goal is that to support your participants, their cultivation of wisdom, to develop their practice, not just follow your practice. And how do we teach that? Not teaching, this is my favorite teacher, I've got to take that teacher's class. More so helping them develop this wisdom of their body, mind, and heart, their practice. So this application can work with any style of yoga, and really support any participant. They could be in an ICU bed, which I've worked with those folks before, or a competitive swimmer, for example. So because we only have an hour together, I wanted to also these are things you'll learn more about at the end of the presentation, or if you go to our website, what are some other opportunities for growth in this area? And a lot of them are in May. We do a lot of fun things. And of course, beYogi members get a discount on all of that at 20% off. So I love starting with this. So think of a mantra, maybe pause, close your eyes, if it feels safe, or soft gaze. And let's step in with an open mind, open heart. And thinking about any posture can be advanced if it facilitates connecting to presence, awareness, and love. So any posture can be advanced when it facilitates connecting to presence, awareness, and love. I'm just looking at the chat in Seattle, Washington, and Dayton. We've got Cincinnati, New Bern, good, North Carolina, New Jersey, Ohio, Houston, Michigan. I'm from Jamestown, New York originally, y'all. So Maryland. Wow, a lot of great senior folk, people working with seniors, people working with those that have trauma. So wow. I wanted to acknowledge some of my teachers, some of them. There's been many, but related to this topic, these are some of the most impactful individuals. And again, my teachers and also the teachers at Dogwood, as well as our wonderful community. And actually, Amanda, one of our teachers, and I were just up in Boone, North Carolina this last weekend with Tom Myers from Anatomy Trains. But what I really love about these teachers is this blend, this mix of so many things, and definitely body, mind, and heart. So gratitude, gratitude, gratitude. So when you think of a functional approach to yoga, wow, there's just a lot to go. What are these concepts? So these are just some of, like if you were to take and look all over the internet or look all over some of your books, these would be some of the clips that you would put in. And not a new style of yoga, really something that we want someone to, over time, start to take the learnings that are happening during a private or a group session, and they notice they're integrating it into their life. They're sitting different. They don't leave the mat and then come back into their social posture that has not been repatterned yet. That's my goal. And for some of you know well that fascia, the leaps and bounds with fascia, we don't see for sometimes a year or 2 years, depending on what is the condition and where we're working, versus building a muscle, which can happen very quickly. So it's this integration of also how are people interacting with the parts of them that they carry into the mat and then carry out into the world that change how they interact and love themselves. And how could this functional approach help them, again, in this cosmos of a yoga practice, really start to live the mind, body, heart compassionately to themselves and others. And that's huge, even baby steps. So when we think of a functional approach, what really drove me to this was initially because as a nurse, I knew that and also a personal trainer for years and years, before my yoga days, I knew that, at least in my practice, it wasn't feeling good. Some of the poses that I was trying to get that peak pose. I was trying hard, and I know it's discipline, but in the modern yoga, I mean, my first training was Ashtanga, but from a American format that was very aesthetic, very aesthetic. And so I was trained to repeat a series, primary and secondary series, and we're looking for my full expression. Not saying that all Ashtanga is that way, but the way that a lot of us are initially taught. And it's really against the logic of skeletal and fascial variation and functional stability and mobility. If you know fascia, and actually maybe in the chat say yes or no, have you heard of the term temple dancer and Viking? And I'm a Viking in my body and fascia in certain places, but I am super, super temple dancer in some other places. Like, I don't know if you, I'll show you when I get back on the screen a little bit, but my thumb can touch my inner arm like this pretty easily. And my thumbs kind of go backwards like this, but it isn't, we can't say that that is what my spine is able to do as well. But we're all so different, right? And modifications for this type of approach for the peak pose, I was trained to kind of demo a peak pose and then break it down and get them, and at the end of all these ingredients, we all were doing crescendo coming to the peak pose. And modifications were given for those that couldn't get to those upper levels for full expression. So again, most teachers would gravitate to teach what they best could do in class and not what they could not perform in demo, like Bird of Paradise or something. You know, really grabbing the leg and the whole thing, maybe touching the nose. So a continuum practice is really different because there's 3 problems with the other approach of teaching to the full expression. The inferences is that yoga means doing increasingly more difficult activities, that's what you're going to be asked to do, and that eventually you're looking to perform like an Olympic gymnast for these poses or these activities, and equals the goal of being enlightened. And then the notion also is that there's only one real pose for an asana. And most of you know the history of yoga, and asana came around much later than many of the other limbs of yoga. And it was to help us not fall apart from sitting so much, right? And to move as the Yoga Sutras was, kind of translates, it's to move our chi, to move our prana. We can do that with many different kinds of activities. So it really suggests we're not doing real yoga. So I remember teaching my seniors but taught in a way that they might feel that I'm always modifying because they can't do what they should be doing. And that's not how I teach anymore. And actually, if you think about it, the order of events is not really safe, is offering the highest level, I shouldn't even say it that way, but a very complicated, extreme, maybe in the joints and everything else, or muscle, or sturdiness for that body that's demoing it. It's kind of showing that first and actually inviting sometimes for that to happen first. And that can really be quite dangerous and can lead to injury. So functional approach is applying the theory of yoga, the practices of yoga, the wisdom to help I or your clients, your students, do the things they want to do that contribute to their happiness and the happiness of others, and learn what those are under the layers of our suffering related to the hindrances of our freedom in our perception of self, etc. So these are a few things I want you to notice if you've already done this in this presentation so far, is listening, and have you done any comparing, judging, or fixing mindsets? Have you thought, oh, I already do that way, or comparing or judging, I think it could be better, or thinking about how you could fix something, or indifference, that's another one that I could have put on here. So instead of focusing on a set of goals, and to me they promote comparing, judging, fixing mindsets, like I want, I should, I am, I'm better, I failed. This is not the best for me, that was me. This is not the best for me, but I have to perform this. But recognizing our deep wisdom of what is good for our well-being through this functional approach for our body, mind, and heart. So focus on function is a functional approach, and we need to define function. The idea of really the goal, the approach is to cultivate learning about one's physicality, their inner body, their emotions, how they interact with these two, and also parts of them that they bring to the mat and in their life that support or hinder them. So there are these wonderful things that they can explore, the interactivity of them, and also support repatterning them. I find the biggest gift of a functional approach is repatterning how we live in the body, how we live reacting to our thoughts, or what our beliefs are. The hardest thing is to change our beliefs. And so with a functional approach, we start to challenge those from our practices and then translate them to the real world, the day-to-day. And again, so functional approach, you focus on the target, the purpose of the activity, not the look of it. So I often still catch myself I might drop into that mindset, but then that's that repatterning, right? Maybe not teaching it, but maybe I'm still living it. That's the honesty. So this can target not just the physical, but functionality of the interaction with our energy, our emotions, and again, our intellect. We want healthy stress in our approach to yoga, and healthy challenges. And what is that? It's really something that's unique to each individual, and offering that is not easy to teach. It's really a different approach to teaching. It's in the world, I'm a researcher too, and there's difference between like an order giver versus a facilitator. So we're really trying to help uncover these layers. So the old principles, are they functional? And for example, there's old alignment and traditional precautions, alignment rules and precautions. Your knees need to be in line with your toes, not true. The feet need to be facing straight ahead in mountain and in bridge pose. There's strict leg pose positions in cobra, how our shoulders are, very, very important, how you hold your leg in warrior 3. Your hip points have to point down in warrior 3. I think doesn't make sense actually, because it's a hip extension, stepping back, and our hip has to open to lift the leg. Shoulders pulled back and down is not neutral. So many, many more. So when we do instruction in a functional way, and some maybe feedback or assist, depending on your approach to this, is functional is very different than aesthetically instructing. We really are teaching how people feel, and how do they feel about how they feel. So in a pose, if someone's trying to achieve an aesthetic pose, it can be hurtful. There's some people in the room that might be in that pose and they're just in awe. They're just in nirvana. They feel awesome. And then some folks, even that one that was feeling in nirvana, might also then feel hurt or even injured. And many times these are delayed injuries though. The inner knee tenderness over years, shoulders, neck, hyperstretching, binding and pulling ourselves around past our range of motion. When I was studying with some friends over at Duke, a physical therapist came in the room and first thing she said is, "Hey yogis, first thing I wanted to tell you is, or ask you is, why do you have people pull past their range of motion?" She was saying, please don't do that. So to put your hand on something and then pull yourself around, right? So the elbow to the outside of the knee and doing the spiral of the spine, those kinds of things. So in a functional approach, we are body reading as teachers. We want to have and teach and cultivate our students to body read themselves, not judge, but body reading, and also cultivate self-awareness, not alignment reading. So the idea of walking up to someone who's in class in Warrior 2 and you're correcting where their foot is. Unless they asked you, so my knee hurts when my foot is like this, what should I do? That's a different thing than wanting everyone to look the same in your class. So how do we do this? How do we actually not teach to alignment and teach to the target in a group class? Individually, group class, however you teach, there's a skill set for sure. There's a skill set depending on what you're doing functionally, because you can functionally work on strengthening, stabilizing, lengthening, purposely compressing at joints, cultivating inner body awareness, interactions with our emotions, and loving and noticing how we're interacting with our compassion towards others and self. So there's three things I'm going to talk about right now. Is in a teaching of functional approach for me, there's three components that you need to train up. So find the teachers that can help you train these up. And I have a blend of teachers for sure. And the physical functional part of teaching functionally, you need to have a very strong foundation of what is skeletal variation. What are qualities of fascia? How they differ into individuals and how they change during movement and stillness. It's also important to also know what is functional movement. What are the kinds of functional movement? And that we could do a many-day course on, versus aesthetically positioning in a pose. And how do I communicate? That's a very big skill set to get people to move functionally when you're teaching. And so you're watching and noticing and actually watching what you're seeing helps you cue even more. You might have a standard kind of repertoire that you bring in that supports functional. And then based on who's there, you have to, from the continuum of practice, add to be safe, to help cultivate and these type of practice. So they're not going into comparing as much, judging, and you're not going into fixing. So common health conditions, you need to know those. And the biggest one for my studio is we have many, many seniors, but we also have people of all ages that usually have some kind of history of a health condition, or they just don't feel good a lot of the time, and they're just like, why don't I? And they're coming to a practice where they can cultivate this safe space to learn. And so osteoporosis is one. This is all the continuum of practice. So that's one, is the physical functional part. The second is inner body functionality. How can you teach to cultivate awareness of people to sensation, their physical sensations, their inner body sensations, the somatics part of this, and their energy body, the subtle body? That's the advance. To me, that's a different skill set We learn about it, but cultivating how you help someone else explore that. So it's very, very important that people can feel inner body sensation unless they have, there's one very rare disease out there where it's a disease that people don't have inner body awareness. They don't know when they're hungry. They don't know when they're nervous, like in the throat, but these are rare, rare, rare. So if you have someone that says, I just can't feel that sensation you're talking about, it takes a long time. It takes cultivation. It takes patience, persistence, and opportunity. So compression versus tense versus tight versus loose versus space versus dense. I'm feeling something very dense. Tender. What are the things that I would teach people to step back from? Anything tender, for example. Moving, what am I not moving? That's probably one of the biggest things, is where do I not breathe into? Where do I not move? When I walk, do I not move my arms? Sturdy, glide. Do I know what glide feels like? Do I know what a release feels like? And this is from movement therapy. This is not from going to a massage. There's a nice combination. So to me, the biggest gift of a functional approach is the gift of supporting students' increased awareness and the use of their inner body sensations. It's a gift. So the second way, when we teach functionally, with many opportunities to cultivate sensation, the awareness and how they respond to sensation too. There's two sides of that, because that brings in the emotional and the intellect. How have they labeled that sensation? How do they feel about the feeling of that sensation? So the emotional is the third place. And Sarah Powers has helped me a ton in this. I should have put her on my teacher picture. The psychodynamic piece of this, the cultivation of awareness of how I can be the observer, or students cultivating the ability over time to cultivate when they are the observer and they're not blending in with their parts that are trying to protect them. Many of you may understand, even without training about parts, that we have these defense mechanisms that were established when we were very young, and they still pop up, and they're not bad things. They will be with us for this life at least, and maybe a next life. But they sometimes blend in with our being, and we can't see when they're separate, and they drive how we feel and how we behave and how we hurt. So this functional approach yoga really, really helps recognize when I'm going into I believe mode and I feel mode, and looking at those and going, how's this feel in my body? Does this feel true? So these practices, again, there's three, I blend all three of those together. Some, we have different kinds of classes. Some are more on the physical side. There's some that love that first and second one, just yummy all together. And then there's some that are quite from on the third side. Just a lot of it's meditation at that point, sitting with our parts. So cueing is different for a functional approach. It's very sensation driven. It's not saying where to put your foot, your hands. It's suggesting, for sometimes because you can see someone needs more stability or they've asked for it, versus the hand has to be in this because it has to be like your neighbor's. So it's very inviting language. What would it be like if you shifted your weight to the left a little bit? Play with that. What would it be like if that inner leg was allowed to drop in a little bit more? Because people don't know when they're guarding many, many times. So windshield wipering on the ground, what I notice is a lot of times that leg that falls out to the side may never go very far. They might have a hip replacement or something, but a lot of times when you bring up the suggestion, you're not saying you need to let that leg open more. That's not functional. That's telling. It's what would it be like to spend a little more time over to the right and see how it feels to feel inside that hip. And maybe there's more space there. Ah, yes, there is. Do you feel the internal rotation when your hip turns in versus out? And how's that feel? Do you feel it anywhere else? That's this inviting speech. So with all this in mind, a gift, again, is teaching people when they've relaxed something versus so a muscle relax versus they're tense versus compression. So skeletal compression, and most of the time skeletal compression is not bad unless it's loading a joint like an osteoporosis. But I want to show you a few things related to functional movements and opportunities you have. So I'm going to do a little demo in the back. I'll stop sharing this. But I'm going to pull the 3 components together related to a functional approach, give you a few demos. But also, just on the slide here, notice it says at the very bottom, there's opportunities to do many things in a functional approach, like teaching the feeling of flexion. The belly button is shorter in the front versus hip hinging where the belly didn't change. Extension, what is neutral in this person's body? Let them find it. What does it mean? What are they using to rotate or twist? And can you invite something somewhere else, maybe a little deeper? When they are using the right side, do they feel a shift on the left side? And maybe when they test the other side, they don't feel it. So that they're learning where they might be stable or not stable, and how is the emotion with that. So spiraling, we're doing a workshop in May on spiraling. There's no time today in our class, but that's my favorite new functional movement for the last 5 years. And how do we spiral as an infant, and we spiral until we get to be a bit like an adult in the business world typically, and we stop spiraling, and then we start to hurt. So why, it helps us understand why babies roll over and then turn to sit up and all those things. So this is what we're going to do. I'm going to first cultivate your awareness related. It's really the second component of a functional approach. And then the next one I'll do is more functional movement. The first one, the physicality. And then throughout this 2 demos, notice if you go into any judging, comparing, or fixing, or indifference. That would be that 3rd component. Just an example, there's so many examples. So I'm going to, and I believe my screen is spotlighted for you. And yeah, so I'm just going to pin it for myself so I can see if I'm on camera. I'm going to tip this down, and I'm going to go over to my mat. All right. And what I'd like you to do, I'm going to tip it down just a little bit. So maybe watch me the first time. Actually, whatever you'd like to do. Most of you are practitioners, so you could hear my voice. So I'm going to come down on my back and have room to have your feet a little bit apart. And again, honor what you know about your body. Some people, I have clients where they're up on a couch or on their bed because they can't get up and down from the floor. So then the arms you could have out to the side. If it feels welcome, you could have the arms resting up behind you. But notice how my hands are hovering. So a big long bolster might be really nice to be here. So I'll actually grab mine real quick so you can see. So propping is very helpful in a functional approach. It can either increase or decrease the intensity, but it also can help feedback, where people can help them cultivate where their body is moving and not moving, and guarding and not guarding, or help them turn off something that has fired up. So here's my arms are on that bolster now. So what I'd like you to do, or I'm going to do with you, is maybe close the eyes and let yourself pause and feel the sensations along the back body. Maybe just scan from the head to the feet. And then I'd like you to lift the right foot off the ground, just a few inches. The leg is straight, the knee might be soft because sometimes this doesn't feel good in the inner knee. And notice what happened to your left hip, and then bring it down. And then notice what happens to your pelvis and your lower spine. And we'll do that a few times so you can feel the lift. What did you have to activate? Where did the bones move? And then relax and feel the rebound. So coming way back to neutral. And now do the other side. The left heel comes up about just a couple inches, and notice what you're feeling. Notice if the pelvis is turning more or less. Notice anything happening in the upper body, the jaw, your thoughts, any labeling, and then bring that back down. And we'll do that one more time again. And then bring it down. And then pause and feel. So the load of when we move our body is really a nice functional approach. It helps people know where they have more movement and less movement, what they have defined as painful versus not, guarding versus not. And now we're going to lift the right foot up a few inches and start to bring it past the midline and past that left foot and see if the pelvis turns or not. And then come back and let that foot drop. What about the other side? So lifting the left foot up just enough that you could start to come towards the midline. Notice if the pelvis is turning, and my pelvis on this side turns way over on my left. And I'm noticing what else I'm feeling with that. Some of you might have even rolled all the way over and come back. So this is something that I would then go to their arms, etc. And this helps teach folks where they're moving and not moving. And it has to do with lower back stability. But eventually we bring that foot over and we get to play on the ground and start rolling around like a baby, okay? So this helps people understand how to spiral, maybe to come up versus coming up like this, okay? So that's one. Now I'm gonna stand up, and the second thing I just like to demo, and I'm gonna bring my screen up a little bit, is the idea of doing. In a functional approach, I teach my clients as they're moving things around their mat is to use the squat. So teaching, especially with osteoporosis, where's there an opportunity in your day-to-day to strengthen and to use some of the things we teach in our classes. So one thing with alignment-based, not alignment-based, but functional yoga, or yet functional movement, is it's leaving the pose. It's coming from one pose to the other. That's a lot of the functionality. So it's not just the balance, it's how I got there. So coming into warrior one, say, and then if I want to come to a single knee lift, I might say, let the hands swim down to your legs and lift, single knee lift. And then stepping back, looking straight ahead, coming into warrior one. And we might play with this transitioning with many different functional cues, like noticing their foot, noticing the energy and the sturdiness of their inner leg. Now, one other thing before we come back to finish and show you some fun skeletal variation is take your hands without thinking too much. Take your hands and stack them on your heart. And now take your hands, notice what one's on top, and then bring them up in the air. And then notice if you feel anything along your shoulder blades. And notice as you press the hands into each other, where do you feel in your body? So I'm introducing a fascia line to the team, that's the class. And then notice when they put this hand here, it's a habitual pattern. That's how they move their body. So then I'm gonna ask them to come into the other hand and then bring those hands up and notice what they feel. It might feel very different, and they get to use their own adjectives. But for me, I feel weak on one side, weaker. It feels awkward. So I might ask them if it feels safe to practice, we call this the top of the A in class, that when we come up to knee lift, see if they can do the opposite hand in front. And then they'll spiral down with their hands and step back to warrior one, and then back up, and they're going to try to go here, and we're going to see if they can repattern that habit. Same thing with coming to a seat. If it's a class that can sit in Sukhasana, what leg do they automatically put in front? And could you then ask them to switch? So it's just trying to repattern that fascia that has formed and how they've been holding and moving their body for years. When Zoom first came about, I noticed that I was always this way. I was always turned to my left. And I had to repattern that because it was leading to some discomfort in my neck and shoulders, etc. So my whole body had been spiraling this way and my pelvis had been spiraling the opposite way. So it was leading to all sorts of things that I was noticing when I lifted that one foot up. When I lift my left foot up, my spine just lifts way up. And again, I'm working on trying to feel really deep in my body what is happening. And is it anything how do I feel about it? And so, yeah, so there's lots of things. I had a hysterectomy, I had a C-section, I had breast cancer. So I had lots of things that I'm carrying in those areas. And I need to find my glasses. And then I'm going to put my slides back up. So let me know, sending a chat, so watching this again, this will make more sense and go back to those three components of a functional approach. And what was I flavoring all in that isn't saying, okay, warrior two, arms here, your head needs to be turned more, you need to lift the heart more, whatever it might be, your foot is, turn it 90 degrees more. That wouldn't come in the practice. So let's see, let me share my slides again. And by the way, the slides you get won't have some of the pictures I'm going to share because they are pictures that teachers that have gone through like 300 hours with Paul were able to use his skeletal pictures. But look at the folks that are sitting here, and we don't want to assume that this individual are they a better yogi because they can bring their legs and rest them. And to me, in body reading, I would have to see this individual move and such, and it might be fascial and skeletal. So you can even see here versus here, is this fascial or skeletal? I actually rather they know, not necessarily me. So skeletal variation is super important for someone to understand when they're teaching functionally. And you teach your individuals over time. And none of the bone pictures I'm going to show you have any disease. These are, again, they were healthy people or healthy bones. So no two people's bones are the same. So think of a pose where you rely on the top of the leg bone to rotate externally, like in standing hand-foot pose. And what if you were the individual on the left? And this is actually two left femurs. So when you're showing bones, it's someone facing you and it's their body, okay? So it's left femur but look at the angle of the neck. So this individual, the neck of their femur goes straight into the pelvis. We still have to consider how the holes that it's sitting in are, they can even be, they would be different from each other as well. But this individual is at quite an angle, it's 40-degree difference. So if I were taking someone with a strap or their fingers on their toes to come straight forward and then go out to the side with their foot, think about what might happen inside that hip joint. One of them might compress, so bone might hit the back or the front of the pelvis quite quickly, and if they kept doing it again and again, might also get irritated into some of the cartilage that's inside the orifice where this is sitting. So again, repetitive movement that someday you can get your legs straight up in the air. So some of your clients that when they go into standing position and their leg is out to the side, the reason they're not able to fully extend may not be fascial. It could be very much they are compressing as soon as they start to go up and the leg is being pulled down from the compression. You only can know if you ask them and teach them in their body what does compression feel like versus tightness. Tension, is different as well. So this just shows you a little bit more how these bones could be quite different. So this is where the femur neck is twice as long as this one. And here I want you to focus on, this is where the femur heads come into the pelvis. You can't even see these. So these pelvises are facing straight ahead. So this pelvis is not being tipped forward compared to this one. So and anatomically, they tried to place them so these two people could be standing next to each other. And you can see these leg sockets are really tipped up. So that individual, say they had that femur that was at a right angle, if they were to try to come up, they might bump right away. So having people feel inside their body is super important. Here it just shows you some of the angles. This is way out to the side, and even look at the crest up here, how different shape they are. But you can even see how sacrums are so different shaped. So common yoga bones, common yoga poses. These are pictures that our company has purchased from Shutterstock or something, but they always show seniors in these terrible poses. Like, I don't think I'd really want her sitting like that for very long. And in that in mind, I'm not gonna teach you osteoporosis in 2 minutes, but I put a few slides in just to remind you, anybody that's over 50 in class, and maybe I don't even know their age, and just how I practice, I assume people have osteoporosis when they come into a general class, unless I know them and we're working one-on-one, and maybe they didn't even have a bone density, so I might not even know, is I just teach functionally where I don't load, where I know from studying osteoporosis that certain yoga poses load where we should not load. So in the case of osteoporosis, that's why we do a workshop like 4 times a year on this for our students and for our teachers, is the biggest risk is the load on the spine or the hips or the affected bones where the quality and the density of the bone are diseased. Commonly, it's the front of the spine. So that's why someone flexing and loading and sitting close to the ground is it's like the highest load. So, and again, most people with osteoporosis, they don't know they have it. It's a silent disease until it's advanced, and then there's lots of pain and maybe a kyphotic curve, for example. So we just, again, how I teach is I assume for certain populations, and actually as we age, I know that eyesight changes, hearing changes. So functionally, I'm teaching different to either cultivate the building up other capacities or recognizing someone may not hear me if I'm not facing them. Now, the thing with osteoporosis, just know we teach a class called ABS, and we teach a class that's very vigorous, but all the poses have been modified to not do loaded flexion, for example, or extreme top of the femoral head compression, okay? And these are things you just have to learn when you're, teaching different audiences. So when we think of, remember these bones and these bones and these pelvises. So think of someone that is going to come into dragonfly or wide feet pose or elephant, depending on how you practice, who taught you what they're called in Sanskrit or not. So when someone comes to sit and bring their legs out to the side, their feet, watch their feet might turn in, their feet might turn out. Also, their ability to move their pelvis, it may not be there because either they have tightness in their fascial, their connective tissue, or they're compressing in their hip sockets and it's pulling their pelvis underneath them and dropping their feet in. So I like to bring people up to different levels to watch what happens in their bones. So it teaches me and them a lot about what's happening in these leg bones, up and lower. Some folks with osteoporosis, this is loady for them. They can't get high enough to not have their pelvis underneath them, and then they're loading the front of their spine. So they're folks that I might take to a bar and bring the feet wide and have them come here, or have them come in wide leg pose here and teach them when are they flexing and when are they not. So I've got a posture stick here that helps me, etc. Okay? So variations that they can still do the pose because the benefit, but they shouldn't do it a certain way because they could load and not be good for what might be a disease process. Plus they're learning their bones, right? They're learning their joints, they're learning the condition of their fascia. So this is really fun. I know we're towards the end of our time, but this is not going to be in your slides you get, because again, this is the work that I was with some of these wonderful yogis, and this is the work with Paul Greeley. So this is two of the yogis, and notice the length of their bodies, much taller one than the other. But look at when they sit down, their torsos are the same length. So how they practice arm length, leg length. I have very short, for me, and it's not a judgment thing, but it's just reality. So when I want to bring my arm in and try to bind, I just don't have, I'm compressing all over the place. So some folks that can go into these full expressions is because of the length of their bones, the quality of their fascia. They might be a temple dancer. So the other thing that I mentioned to teach functionally, absolutely, is know your bones, know your fascial differences. This individual to the right this is the social posture she has, and we could, over a couple years or so, our goal would be to get them to live in their body differently, to form the fascia over time, to maybe be more this way. And then again, fascia is carrying the emotions as well. But there's just some other fun things. This is two different individuals with compression in and how their arm sockets are very different. These are good friends of mine. So when you tell someone to hold their arms a certain way, like way over your head and pointing straight up, are they unable to do that because they're bumping into their arms, for example? Where their hands go in downward facing dog, should they be parallel or wide? Look what happens when he goes wide. He can come to neutral spine. Right here, he's coming into flexion. So for osteoporosis, I would much more rather have someone, maybe not as wide as him, we're all different, but come here. Wheel, again, This is me with, I have a lot of ankle flexion, but folks that have less flexion, she's compressing right in the front of her ankle. So when she goes into a deep squat, her heels come way off the ground. And if we were to force those heels down, she could do something not great to her Achilles tendon. Look at the arm length difference. So if somebody wanted to do, again, certain poses that arm length difference really promotes, it's really an interesting thing. So one thing that I just want to summarize our time is function over form. Really cultivating the ability to put things in your toolkit to teach a functional approach from the physicality side, from the somatic side, inner body side, and also the interaction with our psychodynamics really, really is part of teaching a functional approach. And it really takes a lot of different kinds of training. So I wanted to leave you, these are best practices I've actually said throughout this presentation, is that we do at Dogwood have a therapeutic yoga teacher entrepreneur internship. Here's a quote from someone that was teaching and how she applies it and how it was just so wonderful. She said, to help someone get up and down from the ground spiraling, and how thankful they were. And we also, again, as I mentioned, are giving a 20% off for any of our classes, workshops. We've got an osteoporosis workshop coming up, and also wonderful lunchtime learnings. These are all online or in person, because I know some of you are all over the country, which is awesome. But if you want some actual extra time playing with this, these are some opportunities that you'll get after our time together. I know we've gone over for a minute. Thank you, Lizzie. I see you turning your camera on. And is there time for any kind of questions? I know we're kind of
I
at
actually didn't see too many come through. It was a lot of very specific questions. So I'll send you a note with those and
good.
potentially we can, connect with the attendees as we go through it. But I just wanted to say thank you so much, Sam. This was an amazing webinar, and I'll send you over the chat because it's blowing up with really great comments and feedback. A lot of people just saying thank you so much for this informative information. And for everyone still here, we will send out the recording tomorrow that you can watch as many times as you'd like. In addition, we'll send all the links and the information to get in touch with Dogwood Studio, take a class, think about the internship that Sam chatted about or just now. But with that, I think that's it. And thank you so much for your time today. Oh, I just saw a question come in. Will we also get her slides to refer to? Yes. She did mention that there were some slides and images that won't be in there, but you will get a downloadable version that you can use to follow along.
Yeah,
Um,
actually, that'd be great for the recording too, because yeah, there's just so much. I love the comments. I just was looking at some of them, so I'd be very willing to respond to some of the questions.
Good. Great. Alrighty, everyone have a great rest of your day, and I hope to see you on the next webinar. All right, bye-bye.
Thank you.